Welcome to the Lord and Richards Show, a program that will enable you to become more financially independent and prosperous from a biblical point of view. Tune in each week to learn how to prosper through good markets and bad. Now, here's our co-hosts, Colin Richards, your biblical investment advisor, and Dylan Schoonover.
Welcome into the Lord and Richards Show. We're excited today to have a wonderful episode on healthcare. My name is Dylan Schoonover, joined by Colin Richards, CEO and founder of Lord and Richards. Colin, thanks for being here.
My pleasure, Dylan.
Do you know that it turns out that every nurse has a lot of patients?
That seems self-evident, but now I really get it.
Yes, they have patience and patience. You can think about that one. But one of the biggest risks to retirement, we talk about this all the time, is healthcare, unforeseen healthcare costs. A lot of people think that I'm going to be healthy and then I'm just going to die, but it doesn't necessarily work like that. In fact, a lot of people have some illnesses that last for a chronic amount of time. It could be a long 2-3 years. Sometimes people serve in long-term care. So first of all, just give me a little bit of the background on healthcare and how we need to be planning for it.
Yeah, Dylan, this is a vital topic. As you said, it is a very big dollar amount that many people will face that they're not prepared for. And we're not describing primarily our traditional health care that we need for what we call acute conditions. So you mentioned chronic. Well, acute conditions are things that happen and go away. You know, even bad things like a heart attack or cancer. We know that if you are covered under one of the various policies in our system, that you will have that paid for. You might have to pitch in, you might have to pay deductibles, and even if you're at a place where you're poor, you know, we have the system in place so that you can get care anytime you walk into a hospital. What we're talking about, though, as part of retirement planning is called chronic illness or long-term care. Our government defines that as anything that goes 90 days, longer than 90 days. So if you, let's say, were retired and maybe you had some type of really bad situation occur, a stroke or something that caused you to be disabled from a medical standpoint. So you couldn't feed yourself or you couldn't bathe yourself. These types of things are called activities of daily living. And if you can't do just 2 of these, we say that you have a chronic illness. And if it goes 90 days or longer, then you have to pay for it. Within that 90-day period, your Medicare program, if you're in that, if you're retirement age, will cover those costs for you. But anything that extends past those 90 days gets taken out of your pocket first, and that can really mount up.
Doesn't sound like a lot of fun.
Fun would be the opposite of long-term care. The costs nowadays are prohibitive. They always have been, but if you were to stay in a nursing home, a skilled nursing facility to be precise, the typical cost of care these days is running upwards of $120,000 to $130,000 a year. Most of us don't just have that lying around. And even if we did, we don't necessarily want to spend that on care. We'd rather use it for living a full, rich life.
Yeah, I think if you want a deal on that, I think you move to Louisiana. I think Louisiana is the lowest at like 103, but it still doesn't sound too appetizing.
Yeah, well, maybe there you just get pushed out into the swamp. You know?
Yeah, that is one option, Colin. Thank you for the visual of those gators coming right at you. But it's fine though, because Medicare and Medicaid are going to cover all my problems, right?
No. So
it doesn't work that way?
No, Dylan, no, Dylan. So Medicare will cover you for those 90 days, and then Medicaid is, the tail is in the title there. Medicaid means insurance for the poor. And so you literally have to wipe out the vast majority of your assets, except for a few $1,000s in the bank, your home, a car. And where this really hurts, and I've said this many, many times, we love the sick person. We want them to get the best possible care. And the truth is, even if you don't have money, you can get that care. When my mom went through a long-term care illness, even if she had to live on Medicaid, even the finest facilities had what they called Medicaid beds. Now, you had to get in line and you had to get on the waiting list, but it wasn't a question of would you get care. The question is, how much money is going to be left in your personal wealth to take care of the well spouse, the person who lives on past you? and your family wealth has now been wiped out by your care and by your sickness.
This is a likely naive question, but is there any strategy to removing people as joint owners if you have a history or a predetermined condition potentially in your later life that maybe you would have Alzheimer's or cancer or something that would be very degenerative for you, something very bad? Could you move all of your assets into your spouse's name and then you are the one that can jump on Medicaid?
So the household is affected.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, that's the way it works.
You have to get divorced?
The worst thing, yes. The worst thing that I've seen done to get around these kinds of things is actual divorce, so that
Wow.
the assets were separated out. There's a lot better way. We talked about it in a previous session. If you will look ahead while you're well, and if this is a concern, you can place your assets in a special kind of irrevocable, means you can't change your mind, irrevocable trust called a Medicaid Asset Protection Trust. And there's really just two kinds of trusts, revocable and irrevocable, means one that you can change your mind and one that you can't. But the one that you can't change your mind has powerful advantages. It removes that money from your estate, and Medicaid doesn't include it when they're adding up the value of your assets and accounts to determine if you're eligible for them to step in and pay. And so people will actually remove their assets from Medicaid's list of countable assets by putting them in a trust. The cool part, because that might sound like, well, I need that money. I'm well right now.
Right.
You can actually take care of yourself out of that trust. The trustee can direct those funds for your health, education, maintenance, and support. We call them HEMS for short, if you want to remember that. Health, education, maintenance, and support. So you can keep getting an income off of that money even though it's outside of your estate.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. Those are some great suggestions. And we're going to come back from the break, talk about how you don't have to have Medicaid. There's a lot of great solutions we can have to solve your healthcare planning issues.
You're watching The Lord and Richards Show, a program that can help you become more financially independent. Tune in to learn how you could become prosperous during good times and bad.
And welcome back from the break. This is Dylan Schoonover, Lord and Richards, joined alongside our CEO and founder, Colin Richards. Colin, thank you for being here today. We are looking forward to talk more about what we talked about before the break, healthcare planning. And so there are some solutions out there that you can actually solve some of these problems before we ever get to them, and they're built into financial products. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. This is a surprise to many people, and especially my public workshops where I'm teaching, people don't realize that you can actually use other people's money to pay for those costs of care.
That sounds great.
Yeah, we call it OPM, not opium like the drug, but OPM. And the idea is, how can I leverage other people's money to make sure that I don't leave my family wealth behind in nursing homes and hospitals? And it's an old solution, and it's one that triggers something in people. It's called life insurance. And I know that that's a word that can sometimes make people a little bit nervous about costs and fees. Also, we tend to think in terms of a death benefit, meaning that the only way I benefit is to die. But there are some great ways we can use this tool to actually get somebody else to pay for your health care.
So yeah, talk about that. An indexed life strategy, I think, is what we're talking about here. And how do you utilize one of those?
Well, there are several different life insurance products as well as annuity products that can do this. So life insurance and annuities are generally considered way over here on the conservative end of financial planning. And that's because with the right kinds, you can actually protect any money that you put into that vehicle from loss. People don't realize, let's take life insurance, for example. You can stuff in money over and above what it costs to pay for that death benefit. So you actually buy a policy with the lowest potential costs for the death benefit, stuff in the extra money, and that money builds and accumulates over time. That can be used for a lot of things like tax-free retirement. But in addition, that death benefit that you purchase can also be used to pay for your health care while you're still living. And we're talking specifically of chronic illness. And so I had a client years ago. He came to me, he said, Colin, I unfortunately had a loved one pass away. It was my family, and they left me the proceeds of a home sale. And it was about $250,000. And we said, well, we're sorry for the loss, but grateful that you have this reserve now. And he said, well, I know that my plan really covers me in all the other areas except this one area. What would I do if I got chronically ill to make sure my spouse isn't bankrupted, or that I don't leave all my money to the nursing home? And I said, well, I'm going to tell you about a solution that most people don't realize. You can can take that money and insert it into the umbrella of a life insurance policy. And he did that. What was fascinating is he turned that $250,000 of cash into over $900,000 of not just death benefit, but living benefit that could be drawn out tax-free when he gets sick to pay for his long-term care. And he never had to produce this extra $700,000. That's what we call other people's money. Let the insurance company pay for it, not you.
That sounds really good, but what happens if I don't get ill and I die? Do I lose it?
Well, in traditional long-term care policies, which are the Cadillac of care, let's just face it, there are policies designed around this. It's use it or lose it, and we all hope that we lose it because we don't want to use it. But in the case of using a life insurance policy, it's kind of the word universal is a good word because you can use it in a variety of ways, and you can use it to not only pay for your care, you can also take some of that cash back out later if you choose, and your needs are greater for cash than they are maybe for the benefits. Or if you do nothing and you let it sit, then all of that money is going to pass tax-free on to your family.
That's wonderful because there's some debate, in the long-term care world of like, okay, you've got hybrid options, you've got self-funding. Like, how do you choose if you need those types of things or not? Like, is there a certain threshold of investments that someone has? Like, should they self-fund? Should they not? How do we know?
So the idea of self-funding is, okay, why pay an insurer if I've got enough money to cover the cost? And a typical cost, if you're in your 60s right now, and you were to get a chronic illness that required a typical stay, which is 4 years, so many of us are going to experience this, unfortunately, then that cost is going to approach $1 million plus when you get to that age in your 80s, so about 20 years from now. The costs of healthcare are going up exponentially compared to ordinary inflation. So if you've got $1 million for yourself and $1 million for your spouse, and you literally don't care that that's going to go to pay for the cost of care, then that's okay. We say you could afford to self-fund, and that's the first thing that we check for. Well, if you're in that boat, though, my question is always, well, why not still take advantage of other people's money and take just a portion of that $1 million and set it aside, $250,000, let's say, and put that over here, let the life insurance company provide the other $700,000, and then you can take the remaining $700,000 and go use it for your life and for your legacy and for all the things that make you excited about retirement.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Is there anything that you would guide people on and give them kind of direction and say, okay, this is the way I would approach this? Because we've talked in other episodes that we've done that you really are looking at 5 key things as, kind of the investment wheel, if you will, and certainly healthcare planning factors into that. So do you look at family history? How do you go through with someone? Do you look at their longevity? Like, what factors are you looking at when you're building that financial plan?
So actually in the very first meeting, because we know that this healthcare piece as one of those 5 is the most likely cause of bankruptcy for retirees. That's a statistical fact. So unfortunately, we're going to face that, 70% of us, and I don't want to, play Russian roulette with that, so I'm going to prepare. So all the way back in our first visit, we're asking about how's your health today? It's not because that's primarily an issue for whether or not you'll get chronic illness. If we live long enough, all of us are going to be able to say at some point, I can't do 2 of those activities of daily living. I mean, there's an age where, it doesn't matter how cognitively alert you are, you may struggle or need assistance with those things. But the reason we ask those questions now is because we want to see, okay, how might that affect you? How fast might you need some additional funds? So we'll ask about the medications that you take, anything that you're dealing with that could affect your lifestyle, your morbidity, which is getting around, and your mortality, which is things that can kill you. And we ask about that all very early in the process. Is
there anything you think in the next 10 years or maybe 15 years that you would see, because basically it's a universal fact in America, at least, that people are in agreement that healthcare costs are rising. Like, nobody seems to dispute the fact that these things are going up. I haven't heard anybody go, you know what, everybody's paying less now to go to the doctor. And so do you see any major shifts that could happen? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but would anything turn anything on its head to say, look, if America starts having universal healthcare or something, like, what factors might change the landscape for what seems to be almost like a ticking time bomb of, like, how do we cover these costs?
Well, I'm not sure that we can trust the government to solve this. So you talk about universal health care and some of those solutions, those present their own problems, because then you get into situations where decisions are made about who lives and who dies, right? And that starts to be a pretty thorny place to go. But I tell you where the advancements are, and where pre-retirees and retirees need to be focused right now isn't just on the financial aspects of chronic illness down the road. We need to be focused on getting ahead of this curve and building health in our years when we're still mobile, active, and able to do something about it. And this is another dimension of retirement freedom, is do you have, on top of what it takes to cover your bills and get the fuel and get the food and take care of your lifestyle, do you have abundant income that will provide more than those things and allow you to invest in yourself? So we're not now just talking about vacations. Now we're talking about, oh, maybe I could work with somebody, a personal trainer, or even a physical therapist, so that I don't have to get surgery on that shoulder like I might one day need, or I don't necessarily have to have that knee replaced. I have the resources to go out and take advantage of new exciting therapies and treatments. For my wife, this involved being able to access stem cells to put off the necessity of a knee replacement. We know she'll probably need it one day, but by using two treatments, one was stem cell therapy and the other was platelet-rich plasma, where they take your own blood and spin it, they were able to put that concentrated dose in her knee, and now she's able to function completely normal on that knee. She had one replaced that had too much damage, and she was able to preserve the other.
Well, we've come a long way with medical enhancements for sure. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk about a few things that you can do to enjoy your freedom of health before time runs out. So we'll be back on the Lord and Richards Show.
You're watching the Lord and Richards Show, a program that can help you become more financially independent. Tune in to learn how you could become prosperous during good times and bad.
Welcome back to the Lord and Richards Show. We join us for our final segment today, talking about freedom of health. And Colin, you've said many a times, if you don't have your health, you have nothing else. And so walk us through the importance in the financial planning process of how health is really the key factor, because you can get to the end of life with a lot of money and not be able to do anything.
Yeah, there's many variations on the old quotation. You know, a healthy man has 1,000 desires, but a sick man has just one. And it's very hard to achieve those retirement dreams, goals, and values when our body isn't coming along for the ride. And as we started to address in our last segment, an often neglected part of healthcare that I think is really coming into its own now is this idea, instead of just being focused exclusively on reactive healthcare, I'm sick or I'm chronically ill, now fix me, we're focusing more and more as a retirement generation on being proactive with our healthcare. And there's a lot that we can do that's free, right? We can get out and enjoy a good walk, or we can stretch and exercise, but there are also some things that we can do that are going to require money, and that's where we at Lord and Richards come in to try to free up additional sources of wealth for you to be able to invest in your health.
Yeah, like what? What would you see? What do you see in retirees spend their money on to invest in their health?
Well, I mentioned a couple categories of innovative treatments, such as the PRP, platelet-rich plasma, and we've seen professional golfers have injections and be able to, re-enter their field where a drastic surgery might have affected them forever. So it's not just in athletics, though; it's in everyday life. Nowadays, they can even create organs. That's an amazing thing, but we've seen digital printers out there that can print a little tiny clunky look of plastic. Well, now they can actually digitally print an organ. This is phenomenal progress that we're seeing.
Which one would you have installed if you had to get a different organ?
A new brain,
new brain.
Sure. My wife would definitely say that.
I'd probably go with the heart for myself, maybe. I have a feeling that my diet has not rendered my arteries perfect, but...
Listen, cookies and French fries will go forever.
That'll go forever? Okay, good. I'm glad to know that. But and talk about how that factors into the plan, because obviously health does take money. I haven't met a lot of people that said I want to retire and sit on a rocking chair and do nothing the rest of my life. And so you've got to account for, okay, we are healthy. Maybe we're going to be healthy for hopefully 30 years of retirement, and then maybe things might deteriorate when we get really late in age. But how do we make sure that we have the money properly stowed in the right places to be able to do? Because it's one thing to be retired, but it's another thing to actually get to do things in retirement.
Well, I go back to an illustration using my, prototypical $1 million person. Now, this works whether you're $100,000 or whether you got $10 million, wherever you are. But a classic problem that I see is someone will say, okay, I've got $1 million nest egg. I've got my Social Security paying me $2,500 or $3,000 a month, whatever the magic number is, and I want to, live comfortably. I'm a millionaire. And so they go out to that old rule of 4% and say, I'll draw $40,000 a year off of that. So together with my $30,000 of Social Security, $70,000, I'm doing great. But the problem is, number one, that 4% might not hold. If we go through a market crash that wipes out half of your portfolio, your withdrawal rate of 4% is suddenly 8%, and nobody believes that's sustainable. So now you're cutting your lifestyle in half. The other part of the problem is we're using the whole portfolio to support the necessities of life. So what we've learned to do at Lord & Richards is we take a portion of your portfolio, and we don't need the whole thing to generate that $40,000 of income, leaving another portion free to supplement and enhance your income in high growth strategies that allow you to enjoy additional resources for taking care of your health and investing proactively in yourself.
I don't feel like every investment firm is talking about this angle. Why do you think that is?
Well, investment firms specialize. And the overwhelming specialty, if you call it the general practitioner, is really not a specialty. It's just, bring in your assets, follow the rules of thumb, have a portfolio that's 60% stock, 40% bonds, take out 4% a year. So it's a rule of thumb kind of a practice. What we've chosen to do is become specialists in income and distribution, as well as these other key areas, estate planning, tax planning, and what we're talking about today, healthcare. And when you specialize in that, you know what, you can get a little more focused, right? If I'm going to have brain surgery to get that replacement done that we talked about, I'd rather have a brain surgeon rather than, a podiatrist do that work.
That's a good point. You know what somebody's called who's last in their graduating class in the medical field?
No.
A doctor. But we want a specialist. We don't just want any doctor to do the work, right?
Oh yeah, you're going to have to face up to all the doctors that heard you say that.
Oh, I'm just kidding. Once again, very thankful the medical profession is so important. I don't think about my health until I need something that's gone wrong. And so it's definitely a very big deal. But when we talk about end-of-life care, and you're kind of closing out the segment today, but we're talking about different things and we're coming down to the end of life. It is a very uncomfortable time, very stressful time. So why is it so important to have this in place before you get to the point where you can't really make decisions anymore?
Well, I think you just said it, Dylan. If you can't make the decisions, who is going to have to make that decision? And is it what you would truly want? So first of all, we need to have the money in place, and then we need to have the people in place to manage that money. So to have the money in place, we're going to use other people's money. So that's where we're going to draw on the insurance company's money and not waste our own money on our own health care. We can actually take other people's money and pay for it. Then we're going to have people in place. That's called a power of attorney. And we've talked about that in another episode, how important that is to have people that you trust implicitly on that list, whether it's a spouse or a child. You need to have your financial power of attorney. And then we're going to have the healthcare decisions. And so we've got to have people that we trust implicitly to do what you would want done. And that's a healthcare directive that we put in advance. Do I want, to be sustained by artificial means? Do I want to continue on past a certain point? Let's not put that pressure on our loved ones. And when it comes to chronic care, often, and I'd say most often, it is not we who are making the decisions about our own care. It's often a spouse or even more frequently one of our children. What burdens do we want them to bear at that time? Or do we want to do some planning up front so that that time can be a time focused on a relationship? When my mother went into this type of situation years ago, the means were there. And my mom and dad were able to devote themselves to each other for the 2 years that they had together after my mom's stroke. And they became like two different people. It was like they were dating all over again. It was a beautiful thing. It was a little gooey and sometimes uncomfortable.
The child.
As the child, watching them smooching, And my kids are completely averse to what they call old people kissing, That's just... But it was beautiful. It was beautiful because they were not stressed out and worried about money. They were, of course, worried about mom's care. there. But my dad stepped up in a way that I just didn't appreciate or understand about him as the loyal, devoted husband. And those 2 years were beautiful for them because they weren't worried about the money.
Wow, that's really special. And you opened that conversation talking about using other people's money, which I think everybody can be attracted to. And so when you talk about that, what does it look like? How does someone get in touch with Lord & Richards and go about using other people's money to potentially help with their situations?
Well, most people start out by checking us out on the website, lordandrichards.com, or giving us a call at our number. And either way, what we're going to do is bring you in, embrace you, come around you with love, care, and concern for what's most important to you. And then we're going to build a plan that matches up with what you've shared is most important.
So it's going to be able to be all-encompassing in the entire financial planning process, including the healthcare side of things.
That's right, and that's one of the most important ones we want to make sure we hit.
Excellent. Well, Colin, thank you for all your time today and insights. Absolutely invaluable. We're very fortunate to be able to talk with you all. Give us a call. We'd love to see you very soon on the next episode of the Lord & Richards Show.
Just pick up the phone and give us a call at 720-372-0400. That's 720-372-0400 for your complimentary retirement freedom review. Or check us out online at lordandrichards.com.
Take the first step toward securing your financial future. Request an appointment today. Whether you're planning for retirement, managing your wealth, or optimizing your business finances, we're ready to help you achieve your goals. Visit us online at lordandrichards.com for your complimentary retirement freedom review. Investment advisory services offered through Lord & Richards Wealth Management, a registered investment advisor.